First, I want to introduce Chief Scott Hughes. Appreciate very much you coming and talking about this. I used to represent the city of Cincinnati police officers, and now with Frontline Advisors, I'm representing police officers from all over the place. But I've taken special notice to what's going on in the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County with this use of deadly force on Ryan Hinton. And quite frankly, I'm just going to get it out. I think it's 100% justified from everything I've seen. I think that the decision should have been rendered already by the prosecutor. I think the longer we wait on this, the more questions there are. And while I have a certain amount of expertise from just being in law enforcement my entire adult life, I do know that there are people who are far more articulate in use of force, and people that I like to read and see. And luckily for me, you were nice enough to answer the phone and say that you would come and have a chat with me, talking about deadly use of force and talking about this particular case. So, Chief Scott Hughes, tell everybody a little bit about you and your expertise, sir.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on your show. You mentioned that you're not an expert and you found one. There are a lot of people out there that are way better at this than me. I've got some really great mentors that I've followed through the years that have really helped guide me thus far in my career. So several years ago, I started taking an interest in police use of force and why do officers do certain things, especially under stress. One of the big factors that I think gets missed in use of force cases is that the officers are experiencing just a tremendous amount of stress, right? The physiological changes that occur in that moment are off the charts. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I really started taking interest in this and was asked to kind of consult and do some expert witness work in some use of force cases. So from that, over the years now, I've started my own consulting company called Crosden Consulting, where I have folks that work for me, and we represent police officers and agencies across the country in defending officers in their use of force. So I've been a chief of police for 9 years. I've been in law enforcement since the mid-90s. I'm very passionate about this. You and I had a conversation before the camera started about wishing that there were more folks at my position and chief's positions who would speak out about why officers do certain things under certain conditions. And I would like to think that maybe one day we'll get there, but it is aggravating at times when I feel like, to your point, if someone could just come out and say, this was good, this is why cops do X, Y, and Z, I think it puts a lot of people's minds at ease. I've always said there's going to be a group of people out there that just do not like the police. And I'm never going to change their minds no matter what data I give them, whatever facts I give them. It could be the cleanest shooting captured on 5 or 6 HD cameras, and they're just not going to believe it. I don't like that, but if that's how they're going to be, that's how they're going to be. I'm not going to try to change their opinion. On the other side of the spectrum, there's a group out there that's always going to support us no matter what we do, and I appreciate them. What I try to do through my writings and my blogs and social media is educate the folks in the middle. Like, this is why we do what we do, and then let them form their opinion. And fortunately for me, once most folks understand use of force, decision-making under stress, reactionary time, why cops shoot X number of rounds, blah, 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 I think most folks are like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. Thank you very much. And then they move on.
Yeah, right? They got their own lives.
They got their own lives to live, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's even myself, Chief, who I was president of a large police union for 8 years. I was a supervisor for a quarter of a century. I could say a lot of things, but I had never spent the time in the books and the things that you have. I don't have that same skill of articulation. I know you were trying to be modest, but I already consider you one of the best experts around, and probably one of the best experts already in the nation. And that's why I guess I asked for your help. What do you think of the use of force, the deadly use of force on May 1st by Cincinnati police on Ryan Hinton?
I think based on the information that's out there, this was a lawful use of force. If it's going to be objectively reasonable, it's going to check all the boxes. Officers do not have to get shot or shot at before they can defend themselves or someone else. And body cameras are a really great tool, but I try to remind folks they're just a tool. Body cameras record in 2D. They don't pick up fear. They don't pick up stress. They don't pick up micro gestures. They don't pick up anxiety. They just capture an image. And we want to put so much into these cameras that it's almost superhuman almost. Let me explain. We freeze an image on a screen and you'll say, see right there, look, he was doing this, he was doing that. It took you longer to hit the pause button than the officer had to react, right? Yes, 0.25 seconds-ish is about as much time as it takes to react. That's less than the blink of an eye. And the post that I've made and what I always tell people to do is blink. There, that's how fast you had to make the decision. Well, in that blink, you can have multiple frames froze on that body camera in that blink of an eye, which distorts reality.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And I've seen folks in the media do this. They'll take that freeze frame, they'll blow it up on this huge screen, they'll zoom in, they'll lighten the background, they'll darken here, they'll put a circle around that, as if that's what the officer saw.
Ridiculous.
In the moment. And it really is. It's ridiculous. Yes. And, I like to use sports analogies. And, there are multiple high definition cameras in every NFL end zone. You've got a line judge or a side judge or a back judge, whatever they're called, who's got one job, and that's to watch the receiver's feet when he comes down. And how many times you got one job. His life's on the line. He's not being threatened. There's no external threats. He's got one job, and that's to watch your feet. And he's staring there just like this, watching that white line, looking at the goal, looking at the out of bounds line. And he makes his call, either catch or no good. They'll pull up one of the 10 or 12 cameras and they'll overturn it. Well, how do you get that call wrong? You're staring at his feet. How do you miss it, right? So cameras in the sports world, look at umpires missing balls, missing strikes. The body cameras have really changed, I think, how people think cops act, feel, how they see things, how they view things.
How they react,
yeah. And it's just, again, and I'm not an anti-body camera guy. My officers wear them, they love them, they're a great tool. That's not my point. I'm not anti-body camera by any stretch of the imagination. They have their limitations. And we can't judge an officer's use of force in the moment by that much of a body camera footage.
And not to go back to your sports analogy, but I like sports too, and I love football. How many times, Chief, have you seen when you're watching a game and you see something from one angle and you either say, that's a touchdown or that's incomplete, and you're sure of yourself until you see another angle.
That's right.
And once you see that other angle, and that other angle isn't provided very often when we're talking about body-worn camera, we're seeing one angle, and a lot of times that angle, sorry for my French, is crappy, right?
You're right. And there's also some folks out there who don't want to believe what they see. They've already made their mind up, right? Their mind is it was a catch, it was a fumble, he was safe, he was out, it was a ball, it was a strike. I don't care what the footage shows, because in my mind, I believe that's what happened. And what's frustrating about these use of force cases, when I do expert work around the country, we deal with a term called hindsight bias a lot of the time. Hindsight bias. In other words, you already know the outcome of the event. So you're watching the footage using hindsight, right? Because you already know. I know what happened, so I'm going to watch it through a completely different angle. Everybody who's watched this Hinton video, the body cam footage, knows that he was killed near a dumpster, turning, whatever the case is. They know the outcome. The officer in that moment doesn't know the outcome.
A huge point, yeah.
But it's very easy for us to watch it through a different lens. And even when police chiefs are giving press conferences or they're explaining why officers do this, they're always explaining it after the fact.
I can guarantee that officer did not know he was going to be involved in the shooting when he got out of the car.
100%.
I can guarantee that.
100%.
And
right. And we see this a lot even with the investigators who are investigating these cases. again, the investigators who are reviewing the case know the outcome. So it's even hard for them to sometimes step back and look at it through just kind of a clear lens. Just because, that's not saying it's right or wrong. It's just human nature, right? You almost always know the outcome. That's why someone just sent me a random video. Chief, what do you think about this use of force? Don't tell me any facts. Just let me watch the video. I still can't give you an opinion because the video might show one thing, but it doesn't tell me what the officer felt, what the officer perceived. So even if you think, well, then just watch the video and don't tell me the outcome, that's still not going to solve the problem.
What did the officer hear on his radio as he was approaching? What did the officer hear from other officers shouting? In this case, there was somebody shouting, gun, gun, gun.
Yeah, he's got a gun, he's got a gun, right? That all comes into play.
It
Absolutely.
does. And it
And
has
it should.
And it should, yeah, and it has an effect on adrenaline and everything else. Chief, before we had the cameras on, you were showing me something. I got a little prop there. I used to bang that gavel FOP 69, and we did a thing with the alphabet.
So I love doing this drill with not only law enforcement officers in our trainings, but especially with civilians, because I think this just highlights action versus reaction. Action always beats reaction. That is what I call fundamentals 101. I mean, action always is going to beat reaction. So this is the exercise. I've got a gun here to my head. I'm going to say the alphabet from A to D.
Yes, sir.
What I would like you to do is act like you have a gun pointed at me. So go ahead and just point your finger. Okay. When I get to D as in dog, I'm going to take this gun from my head. I'm going to point it at you. All I want you to do is yell bang.
Yes,
right?
sir.
And if you want to pull the trigger, you can pull the trigger. So A to D, just like you were taught in preschool. When I point this at you, when I get to D, you're going to yell bang.
I'm ready.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
A, B, C, D.
Bang!
Now, let's do it again.
Okay.
A, B.
You got me.
You knew on that first exercise, you knew when he gets to D as in dog, he's pointing that gun at me and I got to yell bang. And you want to beat me. The second time I did it, you thought I was going to go to D, but I went to B and you were like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
Now, that's the difference between sitting in this room doing this nice controlled interview with absolutely no threats. There's nothing here that's going to hurt me, hurt you. Imagine being a police officer on the street in a foot chase. Guy yells, he's got a gun, he's got a gun. You see it. You don't know, is it A, is it B, is it D, is it Q? And he doesn't have to wait until it happens. It had a good outcome. And I'm glad the officer's okay. But I shared with you a video about 10 or 11 days following the Hinton shooting of an officer in Nashville.
Yes, sir.
And it was eerily similar in that it was a foot pursuit. Officers were engaged in a chase. That suspect was actually able to turn and fire a round off and struck the officer.
Stop. You better stop. 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 Shots fired. Shots fired.
Are you hit?
Yeah.
Are you hit?
I think I got hit in the leg. Something hit me in the leg.
And that officer's fortunately going to be okay. But here's two incidents, 10, 11, 12 days apart, maybe max. And in the first one, the Cincinnati officer fortunately doesn't get shot. In the second one, the Nashville officer got shot and he's going to survive. But what if that shot had hit his femur or hit a major artery and that officer had been killed? We're having the same argument now. We don't have to wait until the Cincinnati officer shot at. He certainly doesn't have to be hurt or killed to defend himself or someone else. So that's very important for folks to remember. Yeah,
I think it's the decisions by Hinton. It goes all the way back to him being in a stolen car. That's a tiny piece of it. Fleeing, disobeying commands is a little bit bigger piece. Carrying a gun while you're escaping from a felony or fleeing from a felony is a huge piece of this puzzle, right? But then the gun gets dropped and picked back up. And to me, and that's one of the things I keep saying is there's a reason he wants that gun. And it's got an extended magazine and all these things that are very threatening. but why does he want that gun? And to me, the reason I believe he wants that gun is part of his flee plan, part of his escape plan could include, and is likely to include very, very quickly, 0.25 seconds or less, it could have been, shooting a police officer.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So to me, it's irrelevant where the rounds are, where the rounds struck Hinton. Now, again, let me take you back to one of my opening statements. The group over here that just doesn't like the police, never will like the police, they're going to mute me right now because they're not going to want to hear what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where the rounds go. The officer is not, in that moment, he doesn't have time to draw his gun, find the sight, and line up this perfect shot. He's doing what we call point shooting, right? 7 yards or less, point, get the gun out, and just start pulling the trigger. That is going to be faster than trying to line up your sight. And in the time it would take him to draw, find a sight, you're already going to be a victim. The officer's already going to be a victim. He's going to get those rounds off too fast, so you're not going to have time to react to that. So I'm not. It's irrelevant to me where the rounds went. Whether it was here, it was in the chest, in the leg. That part doesn't matter to me. You've got an officer who's running. You've got a suspect who's running. Your body's not standing perfectly still. You're not. A lot of law enforcement officers are trained early in their career to shoot at a silhouette, right? Just to practice shooting a silhouette. Well, then you get out in the real world, and any law enforcement officer shooting that I've been a part of as a witness or involved with in casework or studied or researched, I shouldn't say every, the majority of them, the officers are not standing flat-footed just like this. Yeah. They're running, they're moving, they're falling, they're diving around. So when the officer's firing his gun, his hand's probably going to be moving, the suspect's going to be moving. So those rounds are going to go in different locations. So, yes, and I think, to the exercise that we did earlier with the gun like this, if I'm running, I can do the same thing, and you don't know when I'm going to do it. So, one thing that's interesting is it takes about a second, 1.1, 1.2 seconds for a person to go from a standing position to a falling position. Here's why this is important. We've had cases around the country where the accusation is that the officer shot him in the back. Well, if you're running, if you're moving and things are happening, we know it takes 1.1, 1.2 seconds for you to go from a standing position to a falling position. The average police officer in a life-threatening confrontation can fire 1 round every quarter second. That's average. So that means some are going to be faster, some are going to be slower, but average officer fires 1 round every quarter of a second. So if I start shooting you and you're running and now you start to fall, your body changes, I'm still going to fire potentially 4 rounds in the second it takes for you to fall. Well, those rounds could end up in a completely different location than where we started because your body changed, because you're falling.
What about the time to change your action? I've always heard, and I've been to some of the Fort Science stuff, not near as much as you, Chief, but I remember the story, the analogy of you're closing the door in your car and you see your keys and you realize you're about to lock your keys in the car, but you can't stop yourself.
It's too late. Yeah.
It's too late because it takes time to get a message from here and take it all the way down to here and have it change your reaction.
The other way I like to explain it, I would explain it to like a jury or someone if asked would be, and this is very elementary. My eyes have to see it. What it sees has to tell my brain what it sees. That message has to go down my arm, tell my finger to stop pulling the trigger. Brain has to stop doing that, right? The research will suggest that I'm going to fire anywhere from 4 to 6 additional rounds in less than a second in that time frame because it takes time.
That's
right?
That's incredible. And you and I are talking and listen to what it is that you have to say with all your training, all your expertise. And I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to?
When I travel the country speaking, we use this statistic or these numbers. Some will tell you that there's between 800,000 to 1 million cops in the country. Okay,
I've heard that. Yes, sir.
Of that, there's probably, I'm going to say 300,000-ish active duty street cops that are out there actually answering radio runs, handling calls for service, right?
Going on that gun run, they're going on that domestic,
those calls.
They're doing the traffic stops. Yes, sir.
Right. So there's 300,000 officers. if they work 200 days a year, because they have off time, vacations, sick, things like that. If they work 200 days a year and they have 5 contacts a day, just 5 contacts with people a day, 300 million contacts, right? Face-to-face contacts between law enforcement and citizens. We shoot and kill about 1,000 to 1,100 a year. I would encourage your viewers to find that percentage of the 1,100 people that law enforcement officers shoot and kill a year out of 300 million contacts. You're going to see that's 0.000 blah, 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 blah.
A lot of zeros.
A lot of zeros, 0.000,
Yes.
right? Now, then some are going to say, well, yeah, but how many do you shoot? That's a fair analogy. We shoot and kill about 25% of the people that we shoot. So if we use that number, that means law enforcement officers across this country shoot about 4,000 people, 4,000 to 4,500 people out of 300 million contacts. Do that number. 0.00, blah, 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 blah. My point is this. Use of force in law enforcement, it's never pretty. Unfortunately, it's never going to go away. As long as people resist arrest, challenge law enforcement officers, commit crimes, flee, etc., there's going to be law enforcement use of force.
And put police officers' lives in danger at times, too. That's
That's
why.
right.
That's why deadly force is used.
That's right. What I try to remind folks is this. Again, I'm never going to get these folks over on this side. I get that. I'm talking about the rest of the folks in the middle.
Sir.
Is that we rarely use force in law enforcement.
Any force. Yeah.
Any force for that matter. Right? We especially deadly force.
Yes.
So these situations like what we're experiencing in Cincinnati rarely happen. They're blown up in some ways because they never happen. So when they do happen, holy smokes, it's a news story.
Correct.
Law enforcement shot and killed somebody. That's a story because it doesn't happen all the time.
You know, I wasn't always that street guy, but I put in multiple years of being that street guy. My first several years with Cincinnati, I was that street guy. And I one of those officers, thankfully, I can say, at least to this point, still doing a little bit of police work. Mm-hmm. At least to this point, I've never used deadly force.
Right.
And that's the majority of my friends. I do have several friends that have used deadly force, but the majority of my friends, even despite working in the inner city, despite working in a place where maybe they have more than 5 contacts a day, maybe they have 10, maybe they have 15.
Exactly.
Sometimes we have 25. But
and Dan, you just proved my point, right? You just proved my point. Even working in a large agency, so a city like Cincinnati, roughly 0.4% of agencies in America have more than 1,000 officers. 0.4. The average agency, you'll see a couple different statistics. You'll see have 20 or less, and you'll see 50 or less. My experience traveling the country, speaking and teaching for the last 13 years, is 20 or less. Average size agency in America, 20 or less. You're an anomaly in a large city.
yeah, we have about 900 in Cincinnati.
And even with that, rarely do Cincinnati police officers use deadly force.
We go entire
Yeah.
years, multiple years.
Look
sometimes
at the number of arrests that are made in Cincinnati every year. Look at the number of traffic citations that are issued every year. The number of pedestrian contacts that are made. And now look at your use of deadly force. Look at your use of force numbers.
Yes.
You rarely use force, let alone deadly force, when you look at the number of folks you come into contact with and you arrest. And that's across this country. And if this video helps educate folks on that, then it's been my honor to be here, and I will keep on preaching this message as long as people keep listening.
Well, I think you do an outstanding job of it, and the honor was mine that you came here and you did this for frontline advisors, but mostly you did it for the police officers out there, so that the citizens understand, a little bit more about what it takes to be involved in a critical incident such as this. And I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure, sir. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
All right.